Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Code Zero Sailing and Racing Academy. Me and my teammate Burak. We are hosting with Ethem Divana. Our broadcast is streaming live now, YouTube, Facebook channels, besides Yacht Turkey Instagram platform by our digital director Fatih. There was a little bit global internet problem, so we delayed a little bit. Today, our guest will be legendary sailor Nick Maloney. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a big pleasure being with you. I will try to present to you. He's a yachtsman, adventurer, speaker, ambassador, executive coach, storyteller, record breaker, 2 times America's Cup sailor, 3 times World's Iconic Yacht Races, 15 times World Sailing Speed and Endurance records. It's not easy to describe your sailing career in a few words. Obviously, it's much more than this, no doubt. It's really extraordinary sailing resume. Welcome once again, Nick.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. Let's start with America's Cup, if it's okay for you, because as you know, you joined America's Cup twice in 1992 and 1995. Yes. And America's Cup was one of the hottest topic lately. As you know, Emirates New Zealand won the trophy and they will keep the defender position. What's your comment about the final races and Luna Rossa and Emirates New Zealand performance?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty incredible for me because I actually even sailed back in the 12 meters with Kookaburra, etc. after the 87 America's Cup, and the America's Cup really came onto our radar as kids in 1983 when Australia won it. So that was huge for me being Australian and a kid in Australia who loved sailing. So a lot, I've seen a lot happen since that point. And when I did the America's Cup, it was in the America's Cup class, which was the International America's Cup class. And then actually I stayed on for a few other campaigns as an advisor or a coach. And the last time I was with the America's Cup was for San Francisco with Artemis, and that was when we went into the foiling era with multi-hulls, etc. But to see these new boats was just crazy. And to be honest, when the concept first came out, I thought, are they going to make this work? You know, it was
I thought the same thing.
So far-fetched in terms of what was achievable. And then obviously you think, is it going to be competitive? Will we see decent racing? And sure enough, this week we've seen crazy racing in terms of the competitors being close together, the design platforms looking really different yet performing really similar. I think, obviously if the Italians had have gone a really small foil package for argument's sake, there would have been some more consistent crossovers as well. So I was super surprised and super impressed. And then you talk to the sailors, because a lot of them are good friends, and they are just buzzing with the experience that they've had on these boats. They will rate them as the best boats they've sailed, which is a big claim from guys of this level that sail everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's and it looked wonderful. I mean, as a passionate catamaran sailor, I was like, we'll see how this goes. It kind of looks a bit crazy. It's far-fetched. How are those foils hanging out going to decapitate someone? You were expecting all kinds of craziness. And then yet they delivered. They delivered some of the best racing we've seen for a long time.
Absolutely. And for me, I've got a real soft spot for foiling. I don't know if you ever remember a guy called Rowan Veal. He was the first guy to use a foiling moth in the World Championship. Now, he and I it was like 2003, I think it was, if I remember correctly. And he and I were both part of the Victorian Institute of Sport in Australia, and he wanted to use the moth. He wanted to use this foil technology that he and Andrew McDougall had been working on, but yet it was high risk. So I sponsored him in terms of financially to develop and get to the point where he was comfortable to use the technology, and he went and won the world championships 8 races straight.
Wow.
So it was a real, and now look at the moth, you know, it's just foil all the way. And it has been the platform for what we've grown into, I guess. So, yeah, I think it goes back a long way in my heart. And I just look at the boats and I'm just like, that is crazy. How good is that?
You play a pivotal role in the development of foils.
Well, I only came up with some money because I was believing in it, and it wasn't a lot of money because, you know, obviously back in those days it was very you know, refined, and it was quite agricultural, and Rowan just needed a few dollars to try and get the package working properly, and sure enough, it was I think it was a real thrill for me to have a small part in that, but to see where it's gone now is crazy, you know, really mind-blowing. And, you know, watching Tom Slingsby in the last Moth Worlds was just so unbelievable in terms of dominance, power, refinement, you know, skill. So, yeah, it's pretty radical to see where the sport is today. And as a youngster, you must be, you know, a lot of young sailors out there must be thinking, oh, my God, you know, this is full on. Yeah.
And, you know, we hear many of these naysayers talking about, oh, this is not sailing, you know, it should be back to 12 meters, you know, that was real America's Cup. Oh, the back in 80s, that was the best, you know, all the dial-ups and all that. I mean, how do you feel on these developments? Do you think it is taking away from something of that, the matching and the dial-up phase of the sport, or taking it to another level?
I think it's still it certainly takes it to another level, but that's the role of the America's Cup. That's almost the responsibility the America's Cup has to the marine industry, is to be that platform where it's developing all the time and coming out with these freaky boats that and technology that we're all looking at and going, oh my God, yeah, this is another step in evolution. And we're looking at a monohull boat flying off a lured foil. And, you know, a year and a half ago, you wouldn't have thought that was possible. Ever.
Especially doing 40 knots upwind.
Exactly, you know. You know, and it is really, really crazy, the numbers that these boats are doing. So I think the America's Cup, we can talk about history, and we can talk about the J classes, and we can talk about 12 meters and the IACC boat, etc., the catamarans even, but it's all a part of evolution. And the historical race around the Isle of Wight back in the old days, that's long gone. Its role now is to blow our minds, if you will, you know, and it does. It continues to do. And I hope that it keeps that way. And if you really are a purist, the sport of sailing is so diverse that you can find it. You can go and sail another class. And, you know, I remember when I was doing the World Match Race Tour, when we were competing in the America's Cup, we were sailing such diverse boats all around the world. They were all monohulls, but they were all so different. Some were planing, some were heavy displacement. It was really, really different. And it made you a really good sailor because you had to learn very quickly how to make each different boat go fast. And then you throw in the match racing tactics and strategy, etc., on top of that, which changed depending on how fast the boat was going. So, yeah, it really honed us. We spent a lot of time focused. Spent a lot of time partying in those days too, but we spent a lot of time focused on boat speed. Yeah.
It felt like the dial-up times could have been a little longer for these boats, and that would make the matches more interesting. What do you think?
In terms of the pre-start time, or
the pre-start,
I think so. I think we needed to get an option where they were either having to come off their foils and close gauge, or even end up on the port lay line. You know, like some things where they get further away from, I guess, the starboard lay line or to the boat end or the pin end. as soon as you can burn as much time that the boats get out of that realm, and if they want to stay in that corner, then they're actually going to get quite close if they've got longer periods of time, or they're going to have to keep on, if it's light, they're going to have to keep foiling by circling, or they've got to keep running, right? Because they can't stop. And when they stop, they're toast. So yeah, I think it would have been interesting. There's a lot of opinions about what people thought was maybe a way of spicing it up a little bit. But yeah, I think as a first run at it, they did a damn good job. That's for sure.
Yeah, in the next couple of cycles, apparently they just released the news with the challenger of record being the Royal Yacht Squadron. They said they're going to continue with the class for another 2 cycles, which I think is a fantastic deal, because I'm sure the boats are going to develop. I mean, look at how the 12 meters developed from the first time they were introduced to the later period. We're going to see some amazing boats coming out.
Yeah, they certainly won't be what we've seen in New Zealand, over the last few months. They'll be very different. And, Royal Yacht Squadron's at the end of my street. So I'm pretty excited that they're coming to the UK, in terms of some sort of do to gift events or whatever. But, it is. It's super exciting. I'm glad that that INEOS Team UK have been the ones that have put their hand up to sort of be the first challenger. And I think Ben and his team have felt a bit of perhaps bias, or a little bit of situation where teams can sort of stray or make it unfair for others. So I think this is their opportunity to really make it as fair as it possibly can be. I'd like to see more challenges, but more good challenges. Every cup that I did, I remember in 1995, I can't remember how many we had, but we had a whole bunch of boats, and there's a few in that fleet that are just not going to do any good, and that drags out the series, if you will. So I'd love to see some really good campaigns, but more of them. And I think if we stick to the boat, it may become more cost effective. I've got my own theory on cost effective ways of running the cup, but
it definitely has to be. I mean, although America's Cup, let's face it, it's a billionaire sport. It's not going to be, it's not going to be World Match Racing Tour or something like that. It has to be hard to get there, but it has to be realistic too. You don't want to have 4 challengers. That makes it really boring. And a lot of times you have such a big difference between the defender and the challengers. Some of the matches become boring.
Yeah. I've always, and this is a little bit off track, but I've always felt that the nationality rule was important, particularly for Australia. We've got a lot of, obviously got Jimmy on Prada.
Well, you got the best sailors. It's easy for you to say. What
But
about us?
But we got no money.
Well, there you go. We got the money. we work together.
But you can develop, if you've got a pipeline, any nation can develop its sailors if they have the vision. And, when you say the motivation, it's really the inspiration. When people get close to the America's Cup, and, if the Turkish sailing youth start to aspire to it, and they start doing, foil week in Lake Garda and all these things, and they go and work for teams. They don't need to sail for the teams. They can work. Like my first America's Cup with Irmal di Venezia, I wasn't Italian, and it was a national program. Like you had to be Italian to sail on the boat. But I worked in the sail loft, and I sailed on the second boat with John Colliers, who is American. So that's how I got that experience. And then with 95 America's Cup, it was still national. So we were, obviously, I sailed with Australia. So it was special. You got Glenn Ashby, who's such a big influence in Team New Zealand. You got Jimmy Spithill, such a big team influence in Luna Rossa. And, you've got the Slingsbys, who was really big player in, Oracle, and all the rest. So I'd like to see that come back, but I think I'd like, and my mates will probably, beat me up when they see me next. But I'd like to see a bit of sort of campaign budget caps. It's
Right.
managed. It's managed in other sports, and I
Yes.
think it should
Like
be
you
managed.
guys did in Extreme Series. I mean, the
Yeah.
Extreme Series, how it controlled it and how it made it more efficient. That was perfect. I mean, that's again one of your creations with Mitch, OC Sport and Extreme 40 class. I
Yeah.
mean, it made it really good. It was one of the most difficult races to win. It had the best teams. Yeah, but the nationality rule, I think they wrote it so that Jimmy still can be in the Prada campaign. They wrote exactly so that
I think
Jimmy can continue with the Italians. I think.
I actually, I think it was the Kiwis who originally broke the cycle. When they wanted to go to Alinghi, they obviously had to get out. But I think I can see benefits for it not being national, because then a Turkish guy, for argument's sake, can sail in the British team, get that experience, take it back to Turkey. But there are other ways in which this can happen. But yeah, it's one of those things. I would like to see, as you say, you mentioned the Extreme Sailing Series. That was quite well controlled from a costing perspective, because because we all shipped our boats together. They're all the same. We weren't developing the boats, and we all had pretty similar hotel packages, and it just came down to who got paid what, really. And no one was really getting paid much, so it was interesting from that perspective. It was a hell of a lot of fun. And if you think about the Extreme Sailing Series, we had probably 8 boats, 10 boats on average, but we did 9 races a day.
Yeah,
and
9 races a day.
So full on. You would
4 days.
You'd come back from those events just broken, physically broken. And it was
few days I was just laying in bed, just doing nothing.
For sure.
Yeah, it was like I was in the military, and I was a commando. It was like the hell week, over and over. Every month we had a hell week. This was Extreme Series.
Yeah, you'd fall on the plane. On the plane to fly home and just be out cold. It was
but it was just such a family there too. I mean, all the sailors and all the members of the OC. I mean, I'm really thankful. You guys have really believed in us, given us our team a chance. Really, it was there was some bunch of Turkish companies that backed us, but it was also you guys that believed in us and then gave us a push to get into this. Then other sponsors came in. So once again, in front of everyone, I want to thank you.
Well, no problems at all. Like, it was important for us that to go to Istanbul and have an event in Istanbul.
Yeah, it was great.
Super important for us to have a team. So great, good on you for having the initiative to put that together, because it certainly wasn't easy. And we absolutely loved Istanbul as a venue. That would be the event that most of our sponsors would go to, and most of our family members would go to, because it was so different to everywhere else, culturally, etc. Really fabulous and great sailing.
We got to do it again.
Yeah,
we got to bring more international events back to Turkey. That's for sure. I
think so. Like, it really exposed Turkey for a lot of us. And had we not have had, and this is pretty consistent for a lot of sports people, if you don't have a competition there, you don't often get a reason to go somewhere. Like, I think even going to St. Petersburg in Russia,
also great venue.
A lot of us probably would never have gone to Russia in our lives, because it's difficult from a passport, visa perspective and all the rest. And because we had the opportunity to go there for sport and competition, we went to this fabulous place as with Istanbul, and we're lucky in that respect that I guess sport gets us off the sofa and out into the big wide world.
But I still have the dream of having an event with you guys, start in Istanbul and end in Gallipoli.
Yeah,
Go there and do a
fabulous,
race
yeah.
there together in Gallipoli.
Yeah, that'd be super cool. And
Yeah, it would be. It would be
Yeah.
grand spectacle.
Yeah, no, definitely.
There's a lot of adventures and fun things to do.
That's
But
for sure.
you really chipped so many of your list. I mean, again, before we came to this program, I was looking at your history. It's like this really, I've never seen anybody who has such a variety in their resume. It's insane.
Yeah, I was super flattered. Bruno Peyron, who is a really famous French adventure sailor, if you will, part of the Peyron family, which
Right.
includes
I met
Loic
him.
and Stefan. Yeah, really, really amazing people.
Yeah, great
And-
people.
Yeah, and
Loic also, fantastic.
yeah,
guy.
exactly, and crazy good sailors. Really,
Yeah, and then
amazing.
even though they're French, they're fantastic.
Yeah, but one of the biggest compliments I think I've ever had was Bruno. When we finished the Jules Verne, Bruno described me to the media as a complete sailor, somebody who had done so many different things, and I was the first person ever to do the Volvo Ocean Race or the Ocean Race of Whitbread, and then the Jules Verne record and the Vendée Globe. And those three things are so crazy different in terms of what they are and how to achieve them. One is full crew with stops, monohull around the world. The other's multi-hull, biggest you can go, fastest you can go around the world. And then the other's solo. So the skill sets were crazy. And it was like 10 years of working towards that, and on that journey, I broke records on windsurfers and all sorts of things. So I've always had this thing in my life that, and this is going to sound pretty strange, but I've always felt like you should live like you're dying. I know that sounds ridiculous, but this time last year, I was returning from Antarctica, and that was a drama to go to Antarctica. It's not easy to do, but one of my dear friends, Damien Foxall, who I'd done a lot of offshore sailing with, he was skippering a boat down there, and I went, this is my chance. The year that he's down there, he was down there for 3 months, and I just went, I'm going. And you have to push everything out of the way and just say, I'm doing that. And just completely, there's no, if you lose your house along the way, finances, money, nothing is a factor other than the end goal. And I'm fortunate that I've taken great pleasure in it all. Every one of those journeys, like I've raced across the Atlantic or established records or whatever across the Atlantic, 20 Atlantic crossings.
Wow.
And they've all been amazing journeys for me.
Yeah, unbelievable.
I remember in the Jules Verne record, we're going around the world doing like 40 knots at times in the middle of the ocean, Southern Ocean, etc. And I remember someone was mentioning something about how much they get paid or whatever, and footballers and all sorts of things. And I just went, you know what? If Bruno called us all and said, hey, we're going to go around the world on this big catamaran, we're going to try and break the record for the fastest non-stop round the world speed record, but I can't pay you, we wouldn't have cared at all. I'm coming for sure.
Yeah.
So we live in that, and I think that sport in general, it's not a job. We're fortunate every now and again we get paid, and we are driven by that huge emotional draw to the goal. And for me, the goal changed. I got really addicted to speed records. I was my first ever speed record was the 24-hour non-stop 24-hour distance record in the ocean. It was on the way to the start of the 1997 Whitbread. And I remember it was big storm in the Gulf Stream in the Grand Banks in North Atlantic, icebergs, whatever. And I remember with the team, we got across that mark, that datum 24-hour mark, and we'd sailed further than any yacht had ever done, any monohull yacht had ever done in history. And I remember climbing into my bunk and thinking, that is awesome. You know, we've just gone further than anybody ever. And I straight away had an addiction to it. I wanted more and more records. And then I got caught up with Steve Fawcett. I don't know if you remember the big catamaran PlayStation.
Yes.
We did some crazy stuff on that.
With Mitch, you were on board with Mitch there.
Yeah,
right?
Mitchie did a bit, and then Mitchie went into Club Med. And
Right.
back in the day, 2001, I think it was 2001, we had the race, which is again Bruno Peyron, who's the master. He basically conceived this race around the world of no limits. So the Club Med, PlayStation, that Team Phillips boat, which was that crazy twin mast thing that Pete Goss built.
Yeah.
So it was just mind
It
blowing.
was a crazy time. It was
crazy time.
And then you guys had the Orma series were going on also.
Yeah.
Really, that was a incredible time. There was so much money being thrown into sailing back then.
Yeah, and we were out of control. We did not know what we were doing. We're hanging on to these boats, just doing crazy speeds, and just, you know, white knuckled with our eyes closed half the time. It was so much fun, and you know, we had some big. I remember with PlayStation was like 100 and we lented it to like 125 feet or something because it kept nosediving. And I remember we were doing this record attempt from New York to the UK, and I was driving, and we were just hammering along trying to stay in front of this storm, and we went straight bows down in this wave and stood like this 110-foot catamaran on its nose, just standing up like cartwheeling a beach catamaran of 16-foot beach catamaran. So it was 100 feet. People are falling everywhere. One guy falls down the tubes and broke his leg and all sorts. That was crazy. And you know, we were just on the seat of our pants the whole time. It was pretty cool.
Unbelievable. Yes.
Yeah.
Nick, what was your biggest challenge during these journeys?
I'd like to say not having enough time to do everything we wanted to do.
Nice. Nice.
But no, I think the biggest challenge, and this is probably pretty consistent with everybody, is you are super selfish, and we know that, but we can't get over it. And it sounds really strange, but you know, in my 20s and 30s, I missed so many of my friends' weddings and births of their children's and all these things. You're just on your mission, doing your thing, super selfish life. You know, relationships are difficult because you're on a plane all the time, and you're traveling with you've got a few families, and those families are the people that you're sailing with on different boats. I think it's not a regret, but I think that's the biggest challenge, was feeling this bit of deeper guilt, particularly with your family. Like my mum was really nervous about some of the risks we were taking, and I ignored that, you know, and now I'm a father. I think of my children doing that, and I'm like, no way, you know. So I now sort of understand how my mum felt, and I feel more sympathetic, if you will. So yeah, I don't have a lot of regrets, but there's a lot of things that, you know, that I did that I you know, I don't think about a lot nowadays. It's great to have these conversations with you guys because I remember, you know, I think back to, you know, like this is a Guinness World Record certificate. That's a World Sailing Speed Record certificate. And you just, I've only just recently started to put some reminders around me because, you know, I'm getting on now and we've all been locked down, no racing. So to chat to you guys gives me an opportunity to think about it and remember a bit, and I greatly appreciate it because it's been a pretty cool ride, that's for sure.
You're definitely giving it what it's worth.
Well, I think we all should, you know. I think I really do believe in that whole thing. If money was no object, what would you do? Then do it. And I really do believe that nobody gets to their deathbed, if you will, and wishes that they'd spent more time in the office. I think wealth is memories. I really feel that, and I believe that. And if you've obviously got to be happy with who you are as a person, and if you're content with who you are from a human perspective and how you treat people, and your general respect for other people and for the environment and all the rest of it, and if you really ring life out, then you're a happy person for sure.
Yeah.
Really, true words of wisdom.
Yeah. So yeah, been
But,
very lucky.
That's very,
Jora?
Jora, go ahead.
yeah, it's very interesting because yesterday I watched your documentary, and there your mother says he didn't know windsurf when he's traveling to Tasmania. So it's true, and what is the motivation with that? And how long Tasmania? And you start from where?
Yeah, I started from because Tasmania is an island off the south of Australia,
Yeah.
and I started from Victoria, which is near Melbourne. Melbourne's the capital, Victoria. So I started from the south coast of the big island and went across to the small island state of Tasmania, and it's 230 kilometers. Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. And Mum says that I didn't know how to windsurf, and it's not far wrong. I was thinking, I was doing the Whitbread, and I was like thinking about, you spend a lot of time just thinking about life, and I thought, oh, when I get back from this race, I'm going to try and windsurf across Bass Strait, be the first person ever in history. And it's crazy to think that in this day and age, you could still be the first person to do something. That's everything's been done, right? So I thought that was cool. In fact, I was really inspired by a woman who still inspires me today, and her name's Lainey Beashel, and she was originally Lainey Butler, and she was a Olympic rep for America in the windsurfing. And Adam Beashel is from a really famous sailing family in Australia, ex-Team New Zealand member. He and I shared a house with Lainey during the America's Cup in 1995. And during that period, she windsurfed from Newport, California to Ensenada in Mexico. And I followed her in a chase boat and navigated for her. And that gave me the idea, maybe I could windsurf across Bass Strait. But then I couldn't actually windsurf, so I had to learn how to windsurf. So I finished the Whitbread, went back to Australia, spent about 4 or 5 months really learning how to windsurf and getting good enough to windsurf for 22 hours, and then got to a point where I ended up that the weather, that Roger Badham, who's the meteorologist for Team New Zealand, he did the weather for me, and he just called me and said, "Tomorrow's the day. Go." So I just turned up and rigged up my windsurfer and took off to Tasmania, and it was a crazy trip. And 22 hours, 11 minutes later, I got to the other side and became the first and still the only person actually to have done it. So it was pretty crazy. Yeah, it's been a couple of attempts since, and no one's got there. And my friends joke, they say the only reason why he got there is because he doesn't know how to turn around.
Yeah, it's difficult when you first learn to windsurf. It's always a problem. You always just go one way.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to get back.
Yeah, my eldest daughter's into windsurfing now, so that's pretty cool. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, we had this crazy British guy, John O'Dunnett, who did windsurfed. He first windsurfed around Britain,
Right.
and then he went ahead and did a windsurfing tour around Europe.
Wow.
He started in Norway, and he went all around Europe, came through Gibraltar, came to Turkey, went through the Dardanelles, went through the Bosphorus, did the Turkish Black Sea coast, and then did the Black Sea, and then got on a bicycle, and then biked across to the starting point to Norway.
Unreal. That's
And
awesome. man.
I got in touch with him, and we got connected, and I kind of helped him plan his way on the Turkish coast, and then helped him go through the channel on the Bosphorus. You should connect with him.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'll connect you guys. It's
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. That'd be
crazy.
great.
That's
Yeah.
another crazy adventure.
Yeah, no,
Nick,
it's cool.
Nick, how do you plan to break a record? For example, are you trying to find out which record did not break? I should focus on this. What's your planning during breaking the records?
Yeah, there's a few where you know you can individually pick some records that you want to break. The first one with a 24-hour distance record was an accident. We were just pushing as fast as we could, and then our navigator Andrew Cape said, "Hey, we could break the record here." We didn't even know it existed. Well, we knew it did, but we certainly didn't aim for it. And then we were like, okay, let's go. So we pushed and pushed and pushed for the last few hours to make it happen. Then others, you know, like PlayStation, for argument's sake, Steve Fawcett had some records that he really wanted to achieve. And Sir Richard Branson sailed with us as well from Virgin of the Empire. And he's been chasing the Atlantic sailing speed record for forever. It's eluded him. He has it in the, you know, in aviation, he has it in the powerboat, and he really wants it in sailing. So 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 these guys often say, this is the record we're going to do, can you come and help us? And then there's other ones where you know, I've chosen that, hey, I really want to do that record, and you focus on it, train for it, and try and make it happen. So there's probably three different approaches to it. And you know, like just even recently, last year we're all locked down, and you know, I had an idea that I wanted to paddle my outrigger canoe around the Isle of Wight, which is not far, 90 kilometers, but it's small, and you just set yourself these small objectives and you go for it. And you know, records are cool because on that day, on that time, you do something that nobody has ever done. And you know, it's strange. I was talking to Paul Larson last week, who's a really good friend. You know, he's a fellow Australian, and he is the fastest man in the world, you know, in sail rockets. So it was great to talk to him about that whole campaign, and we were just catching up, you know, as friends. But we just talked about the future and what it looks like for us. And you know, he's looking at a couple of other projects that are very speed orientated, etc. And you know, I'm like, bring me in. I'm keen. Let's go, type thing. So,
but it feels like it's getting more and more difficult to break these records because all the garbage that is floating in the ocean, and now that the boats are getting faster and they're getting on foils, all these offshore boats are foiling, and all these record attempts have been disastrous. In the last few, the Jules Verne's attempts we had with Gitana, they just kept breaking their foils, hitting some things. Isn't there anybody working on these surface piercing sonar systems where we can avoid, because it doesn't seem like this garbage problem is going to go away?
No, it's a really big problem. You know, obviously it's two conversations. One is about the ocean environment and ocean health, if you will.
Well, well, that's the biggest issue, of course. I mean,
yeah.
Oh, it's so sad we can't break the record.
Yeah. and then you do, as you say, like I've obviously, you know, I'm really passionate about the Jules Verne record because in all the record breaking that I was doing, I identified that record to be the best record in oceanic sailing. For me, that was number one. And I remember when we got that record, it was my birthday. It couldn't have been better. And
wow, really?
Yeah, it was my birthday, and
cool.
and I remember, and my parents had flown over, and nobody had told me. It was all a big surprise, and there was hundreds of thousands. Yeah, it was a French team. I was the only non-French person, so it's just crazy. The French went berserk, and it was the most amazing day. And I remember, thinking, that's it. That's the greatest record I could ever aspire to, and today we hold that record. And I stay with the Jules Verne because I do believe that it is the greatest oceanic offshore speed record.
Sure.
So I follow it avidly. I'm really envious about, the Sodebo and the Emma de Rothschild programs, etc., because the foiling side is another story. But I look at it, and when you think of ocean health, everyone talks about gyres, rubbish gyres, where there's an accumulation of debris, etc. And there's a huge problem in the South Atlantic on the approach, if you will, or halfway between, sort of Brazil or South America and South Africa, where there's a lot of debris in the water. And, I don't know, the foiling boats are going to get around. They were all sort of crashing and burning in that area or a little bit further on. And, we've also got to remember that, it's a home for sea life, and whaling has been obviously something. And when I was in Antarctica last year, it was a big focus of our trip down there because there is so much remnants down there of, old whaling stations and how whaling population was almost wiped out, 100 years ago, not that long ago. So since the whaling has been more controlled, if you will, there's a huge resurgence of whales as an example. Now, sailing around the world on any boat, that's a huge concern. Now, foiling at 45 knots, then the concern level goes up through the roof. Imagine hitting a whale or ship container or big piece of debris when you're up hydrofoiling at that speed, and your canoe body foils just plows into something and you cartwheel. This is really serious consequences. So, we can argue one or the other, but ultimately it's going to be really hard to get. I think it's probably going to go to a non-foiling multi-hull before it goes to a foiler, if it ever goes to a foiler. And I think the Vendée Globe is interesting because it's all foil, and the boats didn't handle the Southern Ocean very well. You couldn't depower them, so that the older boats with standard dagger boards were better performers in some points of the race. So, there was a lot of talk. If we had gone and put a lot of design effort into the standard daggerboard boat, would that have easily won the last Vendée Globe? And lots of big decisions now for the ocean race because it's not a standard course. You're heading into China again, so you're going across the equator 4 times. The foils are draggy and light wind. So lots of things to think about, and maybe we've gone big step forward and maybe we'll come back and find something that is the right place to be. But foiling in the Jules Verne course, you can't even imagine that somebody's going to go 40 days without a breakage at that speed. It's really exciting. If someone, if Thomas Caville called me up and said, "Hey, come, let's do the Jules Verne," I'd be like, "My bag's packed, let's go."
Sure.
You are the first person to compete in offshore racing 3 greatest challenge, as you mentioned, Vendée Globe, Volvo Ocean Race, and Jules Verne Trophy. Do you have any insider tips that you would like to share with first-time racers as a tactic, as a boat, or as a maybe weather conditions?
I think one of the things about offshore sailing is you have to find a love for it. You do. I was inspired by it. I just thought it was adventurous. That was a big thing for me. I wanted to know what other sailors were experiencing, on vast horizons and in the middle of the ocean. So that was a real drive for me. But if you're not really active on board and you're not playing a big part of trying to achieve the goal with the boat, then it can be boring in some respect. A lot of people get seasickness, which is an issue. You are very isolated, so people feel overpowered by that and overwhelmed by that. When the effect of the global pandemic became a big problem initially, and people started working from home and they were isolated and people are living alone, etc. A lot of sailors, particularly Vendée Globe sailors, were called upon by corporate companies to try and extend a little bit of advice on that front. And I think we had a lot to give because we were trained to do that. Suddenly everybody's forced to do that. We were never forced to do it. We wanted to do it and we specifically trained to do it. So we had some learnings that we could pass on that we felt were important. But if you're not in love with it and you can't find beauty in it, it's a pretty wild place to be. You're in the middle of the ocean in any case. If you're doing the Fastnet race or the Middle Sea race or across the Atlantic, you can be in the middle of the ocean and feel so vulnerable. And I've seen, admittedly for me, I've only seen it in the Southern Ocean, but you see that overpower people. The sense of vulnerability, the fear, and, because it can be scary. We're vulnerable. And we are just a small speck. When you are in the middle of the ocean, you are tiny, and it's humbling, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So I think work towards it is probably the answer to your question. Go a little bit of distance, then go a little bit further, a little bit further. Find a role that you're really happy to play, whether that's, for me, that's mostly driving the boat or whatever. So, and then if it's a race, be in the competition. And if it's cruising, find beauty in everything. Because a lot of people get on board and their world closes up. But when you look out of what's happening on the boat, you will never see more beautiful sky at night. You'll never see more beautiful cloud formations on the horizon. But some people just don't see that. They get so overwhelmed by the fact that they're on this little boat, and they don't take it all in. And I have had nights in the ocean where the stars have reached the horizon. Like I'm in a dome of stars and no light pollution, all of these elements that we just don't get or often get on land, and being just so mesmerized and blown away by the beauty of that situation. Right. And it's a fortunate thing. And if I didn't, a lot of people say, "Oh, why do you do it?" And I often say, because it's beautiful. It is so beautiful being in the middle of the ocean, and that's fortunate because we all have beautiful places, coastlines, etc. We get to visit them, and particularly in our lives, we've been very fortunate. But finding beauty in the ocean is another thing. Not a lot of people can do it.
It's also a big mental power to cross over the ocean and thinking about you mentioned.
For sure, and I haven't always had it. In the Vendée Globe, I was so lonely, and I ended up, my world closed in on me, and I was lonely, and I was scared. I got in a really, it's a long story, and I probably shouldn't bore you with it, but I had a really bad accident in 1999 where I almost drowned solo sailing. And that has always stuck in my head,
When you had to go to Brazil with the boat.
No, when I went to Spain, I was doing the mini transat.
Okay.
In 1999, yeah. And it was pretty traumatic, and then you really nearly drowned. So I thought after that, it was the first time I ever thought I could die sailing. I always felt invincible. And then I was then I thought, wow, actually, there's consequences here. So I was really nervous, and in solo sailing, I was never nervous in a crew, but solo sailing, I always thought, what if you fall off the boat? You know, and the boat sails away, it's on autopilot, sails are trimmed perfectly, and you're in the ocean and you perish. And that would be terrible for me to experience, or anyone really. But I left. I was really lonely in that race. Couldn't break the loneliness. Felt a long way away from everybody. And then I got in this huge storm in the Indian Ocean, and it really frightened me. And I'd been in a lot of storms in my career at this point. It was my third round the world race, you know, so I'd seen a lot of action at that point, and I'd been a professional sailor for 25 years or something. But it was really different. It was super powerful. The boat was obviously a mocha boat, so 60-foot long, big, powerful carbon fiber boat, and the waves were hitting the boat and just rolling it on its side or even upside down. And the force was like a truck. Just, I could hear this roar as the wave was coming towards me. And this is happening probably every 45 minutes. A wave would just bang and then just roll me over. And I was trapped downstairs. There was so much crazy waves breaking on the boat. It was too dangerous to be on deck. And I just felt like I was in a floating coffin. I thought I was going to die. And that was when I went through the whole process of convincing myself that I was going to die. It was so violent, so scary, so noisy. And I ended up, I'm an ambassador for Inmarsat Communications. And it's a really genuine relationship because I've lent on their tools and their network and their services for critical moments many times in my career. And that one in particular, I used the phone to call my father and just honestly just tell him I was going to die. And it was so difficult to say, hey, we all knew that this could happen one day, but this is it. I'm going to die here. And it was so heavy, really crazy situation. So after that, it took me a long time to build my confidence back. And that really was probably about 2 weeks, you know, that I was broken for. And then you know, managed to find some strength again through my shore team, and my friends and my family all encouraged me over the sat phone and sending me messages, etc. And it just helped me rebuild and keep going. So it hasn't always been beautiful. I think that's my point. But you have to always feel lucky, always feel like there is something out there that can be positive. And I feel like I'm pretty good at finding that generally. Yeah.
Yeah, you better be.
But
Otherwise, I mean,
it is
just
not-
hearing about it is horrible.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful at the same time. I mean,
Yeah.
beautiful and humbling at the same time. Reminds you how small we are, like you said. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly in the Southern Ocean, and you're a long way away from anywhere. And, you know, realistically, you are 3 days from any real aid. In that storm, there was a survey vessel or a supply vessel in Kerguelen Islands, and the search and rescue teams were trying to communicate with them to tell them that myself and Jean-Pierre Dick, who was another competitor in the race, were in a lot of trouble, and they just couldn't get off the dock. So you knew that you were alone. And you knew that was it, and you had to do everything you could to survive. But the real tough thing for me is that I love sailing with crew, because people say to me, oh, you know, solo sailor, blah, blah. You know, I'm not really a solo sailor. You know, I was fortunate that I won my division in the Route de Rhum, and that was a really big thing. You know, the Route de Rhum from France to Guadeloupe is one of it's probably the biggest contested solo race in the world.
Right.
And to win your division,
it's huge. It's so many people.
Yeah,
I've been to a start a few years back.
Yeah,
it was insane. It was like an intergalactic race too. There's all kinds of different pods and vehicles and all crazy shaped boats. Everything is differently tweaked.
Yeah. madness. And I was living in St Malo, the start port for that race.
Yeah. Beautiful spot.
Yeah, and people, like, there's thousands and thousands of people, and coming out in the morning, and my car is covered in flowers and all this stuff. It was just really intense. And it was 2002. It was a really crazy windy year, and there was a lot of carnage, and a lot of boats broke, etc. And I ended up, I think I was the fifth boat or something, or fifth or seventh boat to arrive, and that was out of the multi-hulls, the Stormers 60s, on a 50-footer. And I think it was fifth boat to arrive, and I broke the course record, and I ended up winning. And I thought it was the most awesome trip. And even though it had been crazy gnarly and big rough winds and all the rest of it, I loved it. And I thought to myself, oh, perhaps I could do the Vendée Globe. And it's just keeping in mind too that I was in a team with Alan MacArthur, who was very famous. She's obviously very famous still for her Vendée Globe second place and her around the world solo speed record. So I was I remember being on the ferry with her on the way to the prize giving with our ultimate manager, Mark Turner. And I knew when I got on that ferry that they were going to try and convince me to do the Vendée Globe. And by the time I got off the ferry at the prize giving, we had made a plan to do the Vendée Globe, and that was it. So but crazy.
Yeah,
Wow.
Nick, we will continue with your Olympic sailing projects, but before for the Yacht Turkey Instagram audience, there's a technical limit for Instagram, so we will shut down the broadcast. Then they will need to reconnect to Yacht Turkey Instagram account. Okay, Ethem, for the Olympic sailing projects.
Yeah, the Callan, with Callan, you are creating this new project.
Yeah. Adrian Carlin and myself have we've put our hand up to have a go for the Olympic offshore medal for Paris 2024.
Nice, good on you, mate.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy journey because I went full on into it, and that was for me the goal. And when I think of everything that I've done, all around the world races and the America's Cup, etc., the thing that really has eluded me is an Olympic campaign at a high level. So I thought, this is it. This is the right time. And I just threw everything at it, mentally and resources, and then COVID came. So Adrian couldn't travel out of Australia. I felt perfectly positioned to be in Europe to be able to compete against the French, who are the best. And I just thought this is going to work out perfect. And then world shuts down. So I spent a good period of time last year trying to work out what was the best boat to sail, etc. So I'm trying to build the Figaro Beneteau Figaro 3 fleet. I live in France, so we're going to try and replicate something in the UK to train with, and then go to France, hopefully being a bit more competitive. And we'll see what happens. The IOC haven't signed off on the mixed offshore medal yet. We're hoping that's going to be before May, so we'll know pretty soon. And then, to be honest, it's a big hurdle. It's that we don't really know what the format's going to be, what the boat looks like. It's expensive. I can't shy away from that. I was quite surprised when I started budgeting for an Olympic campaign just how expensive it can be. So
especially for this offshore class, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people say, oh, it's not much more expensive than a NACRA campaign because you've got lots of boats and blah blah blah. But it's difficult. All my career has been commercially funded, so I've always worked with sponsors, and I have today. My watch sponsor in Dalmar got me to Antarctica, and we made a 200 was the 200th anniversary of the discovery of Antarctica, and we made a watch, this 200 limited edition watch for it. And Inmarsat
Nice.
also helped me go down there to build the narrative between Arctic and Antarctic for satellite communication or remote communication. So without sponsors and my partners, I don't really get to do anything. Zyke as well had me down there testing clothing for them. So
Nice.
that's the only way that I can do these things. And
Sure.
when you go to the Olympics and it's not so commercial, it's a
Right.
very different world. And, you know, patronage is one thing. You know, a lot of people say, you know, I want to be on that journey with you, and they will pledge some funds towards trying to help you. But the boats are expensive. You know, it's different to buy a NACRA 16 as it is to buy a Beneteau Figaro 3 or a Jeanneau or something. It's a lot
And which
different in price.
which is not sure which class is going to be either. Still, it's ridiculous that they haven't fully declared what class it is.
Yeah, I could go on a lot about it.
Yeah, I can. But
Yeah.
why is the French so good at offshore sailing? I mean, they're breaking all the records. Vendée Globe, Jules Verne, you know,
Yeah.
Route de Rome, you know, all of those, Jacques Fabre, anything. I mean, but they suck at racing like America's Cup or the Sail GP or Extreme Sailing Series. You know, what's
It's
the logic there?
I really, because I've lived in New Zealand and I've lived in France. I had 15 years in France. So when I was doing my short course racing, like the America's Cup, etc., I lived in the US and New Zealand because that's where the best racing was. We were able to get paid in the US, and we're able to really hone and learn our skills in New Zealand. So you go where the best is, and the Kiwis and the Americans really focused on short course sailing. Then you go into adventure sailing, and the only place to be today is in France. And
Although it was the British that started the ocean race.
it is in that sense, but when you take it to extremes like big multi-hulls and crazy parameters, the French are dominating. So I always try and identify why, and it's really clear to me that it's about these legacy and inspirational pathways, and this is really important to me for Turkey, for argument's sake. The kids that won, or the team that won the America's Cup, the Blair Tukes, the Pete Burlings, etc., they were all completely inspired to follow an America's Cup pathway or to eventually do the America's Cup by Brad Butterworth, Russell Coots, Simon
Tabarly.
Daubney.
Tabarly.
Yeah. So you go into exactly. You go into France, and those kids have grown up with Alain Gautier, Michel Desjoyaux, Tabarly, if you want to roll it right back. You know, all of these famous French adventurers, racers, human endeavor, you know, driven people have inspired. Like the Vendée Globe is part of the curriculum. Every kid in that country follows that race, you know, and it's radical. So when you're in France as a solo sailor, particularly at the Route de Rome or the Vendée Globe, you are genuinely famous. You're like a Formula One driver. You can't.
It's true. It's all over the news. It's all front page. It's mainstream, basically. But
absolutely.
I think Tabarly was a big turning point that he made it. He was hanging out with all the celebrities. He was, you know, with Alain Delon, Brigitte Bardot. You know, he was doing all that stunts.
Yeah.
You know, it was such a shame. Rest in peace. He's a fantastic guy. But
no, for sure, and they really embraced it. Like you mentioned the UK, and you know I've got to be careful here that I'm not critical because you've got amazing UK legacy, right? Che Blythe, Sir Robert Knox Johnson,
Che Blythe,
amazing
great
people.
guy, love him.
Yeah, absolute legend. But in the UK, and he's actually he and Knox Johnson, etc., they're all exceptions to the rule because they have established greatness that can't be tarnished.
Yeah.
But you know, other sailors that will try and aspire to become a household name in the UK will often get punched up by the media, if you will, and the public. Whereas in France, they don't very often attack their heroes, you know, if that sounds right. And I know that in 2002, when we're doing the Route de Rhum, there was all this carnage happening. Boats were breaking, and somebody mentioned something about the cost. And the public went, we don't want to know about the cost. We just care about the human endeavor element, what these solo sailors are doing. That is the most important thing to us. Whereas in Australia, New Zealand, UK, everyone will go, oh, that was so expensive. What a waste of money, blah, blah, blah. Whereas in France, they go for the passion. They don't
also like when somebody dies in the Anglo-Saxon world, it becomes like a huge tragedy. Whereas in the French newspapers, it's like he's a big hero. You know, it's like it's this horrible horror story. One side, the other side, oh, he died while he was doing what he loved. You know.
Yeah. But I guess the short answer to it is the kids in France grow up, and these Vendée Globe sailors, the Jules Verne sailors, the Route de Rhum sailors, Jacques Vabre, etc. They're their heroes. They read about them at school. They're part of their day. They see them on the news. They, because I remember with the Vendée Globe, we would close out the news every evening in France. The Vendée Globe special would be, a snippet from all of our boats, and everybody sees that. The reach was just enormous. I remember getting off a train in Paris-Montparnasse in Paris train station, walking out and looking up, and there's this massive billboard of me with all my Scandia branding as my sponsor, and it's like, what? I think it was just crazy. I didn't even know it existed, didn't know it was there, and you're just like, this is madness, And Scandia hadn't put it up there. It was the event and the people that were following it. There's a demand for it. They just have it everywhere. It's crazy. And I'll never forget the Jules Verne record. When we left for that record, it was raining and not much was happening. Not many people felt we could get the record. And we were a very young team. And 64 days later, we came back to, when we left, there was probably 25 people waving us off. When we came back, there was hundreds of thousands of people there. It was crazy. And I remember thinking that although, and I wrote this in my book actually, because I've written a book about the Jules Verne, and here we go. I've got a copy here, I think. But
yes, please.
But so that for me just is the whole story, and I write in there that we don't really, as sports people, sailors, whatever, we don't bring a lot to society in general, but actually we make people dream and believe. And that was really evident to me when we finished the Jules Verne. Not many people believed that we could get around, but when we finished on that day, 5th of May 2002, everyone who was there felt on that day anything was possible. It was so radical. And the feeling and the aura is cool.
And I love the trophy. Every time I go to Paris, I visit the Maritime Museum and then visit the Jules Verne trophy.
It's the coolest trophy.
Hopefully one day we'll have a Turkish boat that will try it.
Oh, look, and if you can, I think it's, I really do think it is the greatest. And I remember when I first saw the trophy, because as you know, it's the hull of a yacht that suspends on opposing magnetic field, and so it hovers in space. And I remember looking at it and going, "Oh my God!" It's a couple of meters long, and I'll tell you something really cool.
Beautiful.
When you get that trophy, when you've actually broken the record and they officially hand you the trophy. For us, it was Paris Boat Show, and we all got there as a team. Philippe Pichet was the only one of our team that didn't make it. He was in Australia, but all the rest of the guys had come together, and we were in our team uniform, and they give you these black silk gloves, and you're standing there in front of the base, and they take the hull out of a box, and these security guards give you the hull, and you're standing there with all your mates, and you got your hand out, and they put the hull in your hand. You walk towards the base, lower your hand, the hull starts to hover, and as you pull your hand back, this black silk sheath drops off the base and reveals all of our names. Crazy. And my name was right in front of me, and I was just like, the best thing ever. And that blows you, And actually, really strange thing, the night that we got awarded the trophy, I went back, obviously had a few beers and whatever else, but I went back to the hotel and I just typed the end, and that was the last text that went in the book.
Nice.
Yeah, it was so cool.
I think it's so. I find Jules Verne especially inspirational for our sport. I think it's fantastic that this 10,000-year-old sport, which is kind of the manifestation of man's creativity, man's ability. I think sailing is just, it's something else. It's over the sport. And yet this 10,000-year-old technology is now with Jules Verne, you are achieving something that a machine cannot achieve. The boats, the records that you're breaking, a nuclear submarine cannot break that record. And I think that's fantastic. It's just man's ability to harness the nature and being in tune with it. It's all more powerful than all the machines that we are creating with nuclear energy and whatnot. So I think that's just beautiful to do this trophy.
Yeah, it gets pretty pure, in the end, and it is really humans against the elements with pretty radical machines, and I guess the stress level's really high. That's something that I, perhaps don't miss is the just that grinding away of the pressure day after day after day, and the motion and the screaming of the boat. You're doing 30 knots all the time in big waves. You're stewing over the weather, looking for bad storms and how do we avoid them. And all the time, that even in our boats, we just knew that if we hit something at that speed, non-foiling, we were in big trouble, big trouble. So, you've got to put the blinkers on and not think too much about it. But just even the motion, you're in a like a tube, and you're sleeping. You're like on a roller coaster, and it just really takes a toll physically and mentally. And I remember we nearly capsized the night before we finished the Jules Verne. It was crazy. We just got that little bit lazy and started thinking about the finish, thinking about seeing our families, was sitting around talking, not paying a lot of attention. A big gust hit the boat, and we nearly went over. And then from that point onwards, we were back like concentrating full, and nobody celebrated until we were well and truly over the line. It was very stressful, very stressful. Yeah, but yeah, it is. But as you say, it's pure, and you can't. Nothing can buy you. Nothing can buy you luck. You can spend all the money you have in the world at trying to get the Jules Verne record.
Yes, the last Spindrift, they have been trying for the last few years. They did so many attempts.
Yeah,
just didn't work.
Yeah, with big budgets and all the rest. Yeah, but you need. I think anyone who finishes that race, win, lose or draw, anyone who gets around the world is just pure and simply lucky. Like it's a crazy thing. And I remember when I first finished the Whitbread, and I remember I had blow up globes of the world, and I had them kicking around my house. And every time I'd trip over one, I'd think, I sailed all the way around that thing. It was super cool. When we started from Southampton, and now I'm living on the Isle of Wight, the Needles has Needles is a a cluster of white small pinnacle rocks that go off the western corner of the island. It's like a diamond, and on the western portion of the diamond, there's these white pinnacle rocks. And when we sailed around the world the first time, the day that we started from there, and I remember looking back and seeing those rocks and thinking, the next time I see those rocks, I will have sailed all the way around the world. And I remember coming to the finish on the final day and just staring at the horizon to see those rocks again. And then when I saw them, I just thought, it's done. We've done it. We sailed around the world. And it's a cool thing to do in one's life. It's such a privilege. And I will forever feel incredibly lucky and incredibly privileged for the opportunity, and everyone who's sponsored me, everyone who's helped me and given me advice or anything, anyone who's supported me. And I think most of all, my teammates, everyone I've sailed with on those journeys, they're my brothers. We've done these things together, and that's like my shore team with the Vendée Globe. Sure, I'm on the boat on my own, but the team that support you in that project, in my case, heading up with Mark Turner and Helen King running the shore side, and Johnny Hildebrand, a boat captain. I was talking to one of the guys today, Nick Black, who is one of our boys on the team. We're just having a chingwag catching up. They're your family forever, because you do something so crazy together. And it's a really, really amazing thing. Really beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
We talk about French media. How is it Australian media? Because you have very good Olympic system and you have very good sailors. How they are in Australia? They are famous, or how it's going?
I think Australia still. We have the Sydney Hobart race, which is a really big race,
Yes.
and a lot of people love it. So that becomes pretty special. We have 18-foot skiffs, which also the public really love them. But I think when it comes to obviously some of the bigger sailing, I think the Australians think it's a bit maybe elitist or for the rich or something. I don't think we've done a very good job in Australia of telling stories about people who have come. Like, I didn't have any family that sailed. I didn't have any access really to sailing. I had a really dear.
Really, I'm so surprised with this. I didn't know.
No, I had a.
Wow. I mean,
really,
not about you, about the Australians' approach. I mean, view on sailing, that they see it like, oh, it's a rich man's thing and privileged thing.
Yeah, they do.
Really?
They do. We're big surfing culture in Australia, obviously, which is pretty cheap, right? Everybody surfs, and and then one of the big problems that we have, and I think it's one of the things that France is really good at, is in Australia and England and a lot of other places, we have somewhat uninviting yacht clubs. Now, what I mean by that is there's a security guard on the gate. If you're not a member, you don't feel welcome and you can't go to the bar, all these sorts of things. Whereas in France, they have yacht clubs, but it's not a yacht club cultured fraternity. They go sailing and then they go to the bar or the restaurant or whatever. There's not many yacht clubs where people can hang out, and you don't pay to be a member and all these sorts of things. So I think yacht clubs are detrimental in some respect. They build a wall between public, and some of that public is really interested. Well, public's not the right word, but non-members and members. And if you, like, I've walked into yacht clubs many times and I'm a bit lost. I'm going there to speak as the evening speaker or whatever. And people are looking at me like, who are you? What are you doing here? You're not a member. I've never seen you before. And I feel super uncomfortable,
Right.
And that's a guy that's grown up with sailing. Now, to imagine a parent whose kid really wants to learn how to sail, and they've got no connection to sailing, goes to a yacht club to ask somebody about how they could get their kid involved or whatever, and them feeling that uninviting atmosphere, it's a complete turn off. You know what I mean? It's not consistent, and it isn't the case across the board. But
Right.
when you do turn up at a yacht club and there's a security guy and there's Ferraris in the car park or whatever, of which
It's a bit elitist.
yeah,
Yeah.
none of them are mine. But and then you can't go to the bar, you can't have a drink, all these sorts of things. You sort of think, maybe that's not for me. Australia has that, but we have, and obviously the Maxis in the Hobart get a lot of attention, and they're generally owned by quite wealthy people. So it sort of builds that stigma, if you will. But I think one of the things that's super important is, you know, the stories like Ellen MacArthur, who's not, you know, doesn't come from a wealthy background, she's just your average inspiring woman who is, you know, has had nothing given to her ever, and she's earned everything she's got. And if I look back at Australia and I think, we didn't do a really good job in Australia in some sense telling my story about how I didn't have any family that sailed and had to find my own way into the sport, and that yacht clubs aren't that intimidating. In fact, they're quite welcoming. And if I got to tell that story, it breaks down the walls a little bit. But we're not getting enough of that out. And that goes back to the inspiration side where, you know, we talked about Tabali as an inspiring person, etc. One of the responsibilities we have with the sport, I think anyway, is that we have to be open enough, communicating well enough that anyone thinks that they could get involved with it.
Especially in this day of age.
Yeah, for sure.
And especially since, I think what makes our sport and our culture, our unique common culture as sailors, which I think it goes beyond borders or religion or language, which makes our culture so beautiful and unique, is it binds us as long as you are passionate, whether you're a billionaire or you're broke. But if you're a passionate sailor, you're at the same level. You got a huge common thing to talk about. And I think that's what makes our sport so unique. And I appreciate some of the clubs having some kind of a control, but I think they have to relax it a bit and maybe have their own fraternity room where they can smoke their cigars and where they can have some of the esteemed members only can enter. But you got to let the public more involved. It just makes the sport, it's better for the sport. We got to think for that.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's changing. It is happening a lot, and particularly in Australia, they're more opening, more welcoming. But I remember as a youth, when I first started sailing as a youth, women weren't even allowed in the bar in Australia.
Well, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't. No,
so that's like, whoa, that's sort of really, especially when you think, what, my mum can't come to this yacht club and have a drink. So that all changed really
not too long ago.
Not too long ago. So that all changed pretty quickly. But now it's very open and all the rest of it. But I think my point is just be careful about how welcoming to be, because you've got to break down the intimidation. You can't be intimidated in any step along the way.
That defeats the purpose. That defeats the purpose. I would never go to a bar that there is no girls. What's the point?
Well, the beauty in it's freedom as well, right? And you need freedom of access is part of it.
Yes.
So, women should feel like they should be part of it. Particularly if you look at Royal Hong Kong Yacht Club, for argument's sake, or any yacht clubs around the world, the local kids should be able to feel like they can knock on the door and find out how to get involved. These are important things, regardless of where they come from or how much money they have or whatever. Because some of the best sailors in the world, you'll probably find underprivileged kids in the back streets of your local yacht club. I think it's all changing and evolving, but I think we need to break down all the intimidations, because the language, in English, we've got Cunningham, Vang, all these outhauls, all these things, and people are like, "What?" When I get involved, I have to learn this crazy language to start with, and
same in Turkey.
yeah, so there's intimidation after intimidation after intimidation. Just simplify it, and make it as comfortable and as welcoming as possible. And to answer your question, Australia loves their sailing, but they get more into the 18-foot skiff, rough and tumble, and a bit of crashing, like we all, extreme sailing series, boats flipping over, all the rest, bit of swearing, maybe all that sort of carry on. Because Australians, I think, deep down are a bit wild, so they like a bit of a brawl, if you will. So yeah, it's cool, and it actually, I feel quite proud to be in Australia as Australia, and I didn't really think we were getting any recognition for what we were doing, but in 2000, I received a Australian sports medal, and I had no idea that was even on the cards. So it was a huge surprise to me, and I think what it did when it happened, I remember I was doing a transatlantic record with Steve Fawcett, and my mum told me just before we left, and I was like, "Are you sure they got the right person?" Because a letter from the Queen and all sorts of stuff, and I'm like, "Really? Is it my name on the letter?" It just was so mind-blowing, but it was an indication that Australia was watching and people were following, and it did mean something.
Okay.
I think it's so inspirational that you're sharing all this experience, and now there is this new hype with social media and connectedness, and these stories can ripple across the world, and it would affect so many people. And now, like all these new guys coming in the sport, becoming all heroes, like Tom Slingsby, Spithill, Glenn Ashby, and the likes of them. I think there's a total new age that is going to open up with your experience, with you backing up, with you, Mitch, all the the more experienced guys who came and saw how it was back then and how it is now. It's going to open up so many new opportunities, I think.
Yeah, I hope so, and I hope we do get the chance. Well, we do. We are. I remember Magenta Project is a really strong female sailing program. It's international, but it's quite well founded in the UK, and they've got a mentoring program where some of the women from even Tracy Edwards' around the world races and things like that, they're very predominant in the mentoring program, which I think is super important. Because even though we're maybe not sailing the most high performance boats now, it's still the ocean, still the wind. The crafts have changed. We felt like, if you say Mitchie and myself as examples, there's plenty of us, Brian Thompson, Damien Fox, a lot of guys that we feel pioneered certain periods of sailing and different boats. And that's cool. It has something, and it's not, maybe not as cutting edge as it was today, but look at that boat there on the screen. It was a crazy machine, and not much. It's the same mentality, if you will. It takes the same approach to it, and it's not all about moths and AC boats and hydrofoiling big cats. Sailing's really diverse, and
yes,
if we can bring something to that, then cool. And that's what I like. I like having, I was gifted with the documentary. That was amazing thing for, for Sunset and Vine to do for me with OC Sport and the team. And it's something that's vaulted. It's a part of my life that is recorded and you can watch it. And then to have written a book, my kids and my grandkids and their kids, they've got this wad of paper that is a story from my life, if you will. So I think as I'm getting older, legacy is quite important to me. And, even today, I think of, I was talking recently to UKSA, which is the Sailing Academy here on the Isle of Wight. And, I have an interest in these sorts of organizations because, is that my legacy to pass down some of the learnings to provide a bit of encouragement here or mentoring, if you will. And with the Figaro and the Olympic campaign, part of the training process is myself and Brian Thompson and several, the Mike Goldings and Dee Kafaris and Shirley Robertson, etc., to be able to pass down, collectively pool our knowledge, collectively learn from each other, but also vault it and package it so that those coming through can actually absorb it as well. Not to say that we have all the answers, because it's a two-way street. These young guys coming through, guys and girls, we're learning so much from them as well. So it's just a good thing, and pretty lucky to have something to offer. I hope anyway.
And Nick, also, you are an international speaker and C-level executive and corporate team performance coach. What is the similarity between corporate life and the sailing?
The corporate life is like, if the speaking, as you can tell, I talk too much, so that comes pretty easy.
You're a great storyteller.
Yeah.
Exactly.
People say to me, if I'm going to give a corporate presentation, and it might be dinner speaking, whatever, people often say to me, "Are you nervous?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just telling the story of something that happened, and it's the truth, so I'm just telling it." And so I don't not necessarily get nervous. People say to me, "Are you here to motivate us?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just here to talk about what tools I've used to try and achieve my goals." And I think the greatest motivation for anyone is to have a goal. So I just, in my storytelling, I try and encourage people to establish a clear goal, and then I leave them with certain tools to work towards that goal and pretty much guarantee that they can achieve that goal. So that's what I leave with them in my presentation, and all that's become natural. And in my corporate coaching side, if you will, the executive coaching that I do, I make no apologies when I first go into that all of my work with them will be based on the analogy of sport, because I think that success in sport and success in business are exactly the same. And I cannot find any parameter to prove me wrong. And I think if you can find a way, like we've got young guy in I own a company called Apsu, which is a superfood multivitamin, and we sponsor a lot of elite athletes, and we're WADA compliant and all the rest of it. So we're working with world champions, Olympic athletes, etc. And for me, these people who, one guy in particular, Lincoln Jews, a paddler from Australia, stand-up paddleboarder, 2 times world champion, and what he could bring to an organization purely by identifying a goal and working out a way to achieve that goal, the application, the processing, the commitment, dedication, focus, all the rest of it is really applicable. Every company needs to have goals. Every individual in a company needs to have goals, and every business unit needs to have goals. So there's no real difference in between sport and business, and I like to share that. I really think it's strong, and a lot of people I speak to think they aren't goal orientated. They go, "Oh no, I'm not really into goals." We got a goal every day, even if that's just to get to the end of the day. Everybody's got goals. It's just about refining them and identifying them and making them work for you. Don't just get to the end of the day. Get to the end of the day having done something great, and program people to think, because the mind's manipulative. Can make your mind do a lot of different things. It's about training your mind to be either more positive, or more determined, or more focused, or more willing to push harder. So yeah. But on the corporate side, I'm often more of a person that people can just confide in, because if in business, a lot of people that are successful are quite lonely, and to not go too deep, when you're really successful in sport, you are pretty lonely as well. You know,
Exactly.
and I've got some, you know, my greatest friends, because we've devoted our life to this, right? So many of my dearest friends are my competitors.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there's always going to be something there that is divides us. There's always something. And I remember actually when I had a period where I was breaking a lot of records, a lot of things were going my way. 2002, for argument's sake, got the Jules Verne record, then won the Route de Rhum, was on a huge high. And one of my best friends, Brian Thompson, he's the biggest multi-wholesaler in the world, you know. He's set, like, I don't know, probably 40 world speed records. The guy's just a freak. And he was with Maiden, and boat was breaking, and a few things that weren't getting the records. And I felt guilty because I was having the luck and he wasn't. And I'll never forget, they got the transatlantic record, if I remember correctly, one major record. I'm pretty sure it was a transatlantic record, male and female mix, that the luck and the accolades were now shared. If you know what I mean. It sounds weird, but I think when I was successful, people are like, there's a bit of resentment because we are jealous of each other, regardless of how happy we say we are of each other. We wish it was us when someone wins, but
Sure.
yeah, I think when you're really on top of it, you can be really lonely. And I see a lot of F1 drivers and things like that have their own little circle of people that are with them. And you know, I felt at times I would have liked to have had that circle of trust, and yeah.
We are here for you.
There you go. If I ever find success again, I'll come to Turkey. Yeah.
No, you are very successful and you're very inspirational. And really, on this note, I think we should, on the high note, we should end it for now, because I think this should be a continued interview. Not, I mean, we cannot break it up like this, but I don't wanna. We don't wanna keep tiring you more. We had you for 2 hours already.
Sorry, it's my fault.
No.
No.
It is such a pleasure and a true honor to have you here. And I've always felt it was an honor to have you on my wedding day with us in Sydney. It was really inspirational. When I was in Sydney, seeing that whole culture of maritime and just joy and people, and was just so wonderful. I said, okay, I'm gonna get married here. And then you were there, so you have a special spot in my heart. Thank you for accepting our invitation and being here and sharing your heart and your feelings with us. It has been a really amazing interview, but I will only let you go if you promise you're gonna come back to this show again, because there's so much more to talk about. We just covered like the tip of the iceberg. It's just too much.
Maybe we can do it face to face.
Well, you have to come to Turkey.
There you go.
We already talked about this. You gotta come to Turkey this summer, and then we organize everything.
That'd be a nice setting at your place with the water, with the boats.
And our yacht club approach is everybody is welcome. Everybody who loves the sea, who loves the life in the sea, is our member.
Maybe we can do an interview, and then I do some storytelling to your guests one night over dinner.
Why not?
That would be
Great.
You're just too much. You're just too much. You're too good.
For them all.
Get out of here.
Oh, no. So thanks for that. Look, and from my perspective, you know, it was a great honor to be at your wedding day, which was fabulous, and a beautiful day on Sydney Harbour. And you know, when I talk about sailing in Australia, you know, it's contradictory to look across Sydney Harbour on a day like that, and it was full of sailing boats and beautiful sunshine setting, and you know, when I think of that, yeah, we are a sailing country from that perspective. But
Sure.
it has been a great thrill, and I've loved racing against you and all the rest of it, and being part of your life, and
Thank you.
particularly
Always.
that special day. And thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Really a huge pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Nick. You rocket the program today.
Yes.
Sorry, it's probably talked too much.
Rocket. Yeah.
Our guest was legendary sailor Nick Maloney today, and thank you so much for joining us once again, Nick. It was a big pleasure and privilege being with you. Actually, there are lots of questions in our minds still, and we hope to see you once again in our program if you have time. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care. Keep safe and healthy.
You too.
Cheers.
Bye.